Benvenuti.
Welcome to all of you. Welcome to those who are here present today in Sala delle Colonne, Giustinian, and all those who are online. We welcome the representatives of the institutions, both Venetian and international. We welcome the friends of the Architecture Biennale. 1 year ago, in these days, we introduced the art exhibition by Cecilia Alemanni. And we were in the days of the aggression of Russia against Ukraine. We immediately had to decide how to behave, to follow the indications of our government, how to behave towards Russia. The pavilion was closed by the commissioners and curators of the Russian pavilion, and we tried to decide how we could support the presence of Ukraine with its pavilion, expanding their presence to other spaces. We thought at the time that for the inauguration of the exhibition, perhaps the war would have stopped. We hoped a diplomatic solution could be found. 1 year later, instead, we all know how things are going on. We do not have an Ukrainian pavilion yet. We are ready to support their presence should they decide to be in the Biennale, as we have always done in the moment of crisis. We have done so with the battle of women in Iran for freedom of expression and in other emergency situations when human rights and freedoms are jeopardized. I had to mention this as we have to keep in mind the sufferings of those who have been hit recently by the earthquake in Turkey and Syria. I will read a brief contribution before passing the floor to Lesley Lokko. I would like to remember that it is a moving moment for me because after Hashim Sakis' exhibition and Cecilia Alemanni's exhibition, two extremely successful exhibitions, Lesley Lokko is the first curator I have appointed myself. Please, Lesley, be great as it will surely be. In recent years, architecture has been established as the discipline that more than any other can and must provide answers to the needs of humanity. Almost on par with scientific research in the field of medicine, architecture is asked to provide immediate answers to urgent imperatives for the survival of the Earth and the genera that inhabit it. This is unequivocally confirmed by the years of COVID. The Biennale di Venezia, dedicating over 6 months to the great international architecture exhibition in the world, the 18th edition this year, becomes a center for global observation, dealing with the problems of the present with an eye to the future. Not coincidentally, the curator Lesley Lokko has titled her edition The Laboratory of the Future. Until recently, the exhibition was experienced as a representation of the new, of beauty and of technological development in the science of construction. Today, the expectations and responsibilities attributed to those who work in the field of architecture are extremely high, making the architectural profession increasingly complex and concentrated on distinctly concrete themes that concern the reality around us, even if that doesn't mean forswearing aesthetic research. This may well be why the curator likes to define the participants as practitioners, because she finds the term architect to be reductive, and the word practitioners immediately suggests the idea of a necessary and tangible action without preferring tried and true or aesthetic canons. The most recent architecture biennales have made awareness of the world's most urgent themes the center of gravity. And so Lesley Lokko's edition comes enriched with a new and original college program, as all the other arts of the La Biennale have done before. This is an important step. The Architecture College will not be a training ground in which young women and men, future graduates of professionals at the onset of their career, will exhibit projects or architectural works. It will be a veritable campus which, under the responsibility of the curator and the tutors she has chosen, will help the participants and all of us to understand the duties of contemporary architecture and especially how to transmit them. A laboratory of the future must necessarily begin from a specific starting point, from one or more hypotheses seeking confirmation. Lokko starts with our continent of origin, Africa, to talk about its historical, economic, climate, and political criticalities, and to let us all know that much of what is happening to the rest of the world has already happened to us. Let's work together to understand where we have gone wrong so far and how we must face the future. This is a starting point that seeks to heed those segments of humanity that have been left out of the debate and opens to a multiplicity of voices that have been silenced for so long by one that considers itself to be rightfully dominant in a vital and unavoidable contest. I believe that this is La Biennale di Venezia's true task as an institution, and not only for architecture. We must start here to seize the opportunity that will allow us to raise the bar in the way we approach all other disciplines. The 18th International Architecture Exhibition, curated by Lesley Lokko, will be the first to experiment in the field a path towards achieving carbon neutrality, to the point that the exhibition itself is structured along the themes of decolonization and decarbonization. Since the International Film Festival in 2021, the Venice Biennale has been committed to this crucial objective, and last year already obtained the certification of carbon neutrality. We are perhaps the first major international cultural institution to achieve this result, thanks to a meticulous collection of data on the cause of the CO2 emissions generated by all our events, and thanks to the adoption of subsequent measures. We are proud of this primacy and hope that it will be disputed by as many institutions as possible in the name of fighting climate change. We would like to thank all participating countries and the new national participations. We thank the Ministry of Culture, the local institutions that support in various ways La Biennale, the City of Venice, the Veneto region, the Archaeological, Fine Arts and Landscape Superintendency of the Municipality of Venice, and the Italian Navy. Our thanks go to Rolex, partner and official timepiece of the event, for more than half a century partner of some of the world's most talented artists and leading cultural institution through its perpetual arts initiative. Rolex supports Lesley Lokko's Carnival series of events. The Rolex Pavilion at Di Giardini will again feature various exhibitions linked to Rolex dedication to architecture, as well as to the transmission of knowledge to the architects of tomorrow. We want to thank the sponsors, Bloomberg Philanthropies with Bloomberg Connects and Vela Venezia Unica. We thank the important international donors, organizations and institutions who have contributed to the success of the Biennale. Our warmest thanks to Lesley Lokko and to her entire team. And finally, we would also like to thank the Board of Directors, the Board of Auditors, and the many professionals who have dedicated their time and their efforts to realize and to organize this exhibition. The floor to Lesley Lokko. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Last time I was here, I had promised my Italian would be better, and it was a great mistake. Maybe next time.
What does it mean to be an agent of change? An architecture exhibition is both a moment and a process, simultaneously journey and destination. Over the past 9 months, in hundreds of conversations, text messages, Zoom calls and meetings, The question of whether exhibitions of this scale, both in terms of carbon and cost, are justified has surfaced time and again. At the press conference in May last year, I referred to the exhibition several times as a story. Today, my understanding has changed. An architecture exhibition borrows its structure and format from an art exhibition, but it differs from art in critical ways, which often go unnoticed. Aside from the desire to tell a story, questions of production, resources, and representation are central, yet are rarely acknowledged or discussed. From the outset, it was clear that the essential gesture of the Laboratory of the Future would be change. In those same discussions that sought to justify the exhibition's existence were difficult and often emotional conversations to do with resources, rights, and risk. I do not underestimate or take for granted the cost of production, participation, particularly in these times, and in locations where so many of the participants in the Laboratory of the Future live and work. I would like to acknowledge the support of 3 institutions in particular, Rolex, Ford Foundation, and Bloomberg Philanthropies, whose commitment to supporting this new generation of talent has been vital, both to me personally as the first African curator and to the dozens of participants for whom this support has been a lifeline. For the first time ever, the spotlight has fallen on Africa and the African diaspora, that fluid and enmeshed culture of people of African descent that now straddles the globe. What do we wish to say? And how will what we say change anything? And perhaps most importantly of all, how will what we say interact with and infuse what others say, so that the exhibition is not a single story, but multiple stories that reflect the vexing, gorgeous kaleidoscope of ideas, contexts, aspirations, and meanings that is every voice responding to the issues of its time. It is often said that culture is the sum total of the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. Whilst that is true, what is missing in the statement is any acknowledgement of who the we in question is. In architecture particularly, the dominant voice has historically been a singular, exclusive voice, whose reach and power ignores huge swathes of humanity, financially, creatively, conceptually, as though we have all been listening and speaking in one tongue only. The story of architecture is therefore incomplete, not wrong, but incomplete. And it is in this context particularly that exhibitions matter. They are a unique moment in which to augment, change, or retell a story whose audience and impact is felt far beyond the physical walls and spaces that hold it. What we say publicly matters because it is the ground on which change is built, in tiny increments as well as large leaps. The Laboratory of the Future is an exhibition of several distinct parts. It includes 89 participants, over half of whom are from Africa or the African diaspora. The gender balance is 50-50, and the average age is 43. The youngest is 24. 46% count education as a form of practice, and over 70% of the exhibits are by practices run by an individual or a very small team. These statistics reflect a seismic change in the culture of architectural production at large, and an even greater shift in participation in international exhibitions. The balance has shifted. As Chinua Achebe famously said, things fall apart, the center cannot hold. And central to all the projects is the primacy and potency of one tool, the imagination. As I said earlier, it is impossible to build a better world if one cannot first imagine it. Gathered in the central pavilion are some of the most significant African and African diaspora practitioners working today. It gives me enormous pride to say that they represent only a fraction of the exploding network of practitioners who are redefining the term practice in ways that could not have been imagined a decade ago. Ajay Associates, Atelier Masomi, Basis, Cave Bureau, Hood Design Studio, Ibrahim Mahama, Kere Architecture, Kofi and Diabate Architect, Mass Design Group, Olalekan Jefus, Soft Lab at Penn State University, Studio Sean Canty, Samaya Valley and Mawad Musbahi, Tandy Lowenson, Fiesta Gates Studio, and Urban American City. However, there is one person missing. Dorina Dengo was an exceptional Ugandan architect who tragically passed away last year. Our last text message, a couple of weeks before she died, was about the Biennale. I think I speak for everyone here, everyone who knew her, especially those of us living and working on the African continent, when I say that her presence is deeply missed. The second part of the exhibition, Dangerous Liaisons, takes place in the Arsenale complex and features 37 practitioners whose work moves fluidly across disciplinary boundaries, across geographies, and across new forms of partnership and collaboration. We have deliberately chosen to frame participants as practitioners, not as architects or urbanists, landscape architects, and so on. We argue that the rich, complex conditions of both Africa and a rapidly hybridizing world call for different understandings of the term architect, one who works both inside and outside conventional disciplinary boundaries. Work from every continent is represented, which was important in trying to tell as complete a story as possible, given the historical silences. There are single practitioners, Suzanne Dhaliwal, Liam Young, Huda Tayob. There are two-person practices who combine teaching with practice and research, ADWO, Decolonizing Art and Architecture Residency, AMAA, Collective or Collaborative Architecture Office for Research and Development, Estudio A0, Laboratoire d'Architecture, Wolf Architects, and Dream the Combine. Moving up slightly in scale, there are offices who work in surprisingly compatible ways in locations that are wildly different. Grandeza Studio, Bolade Design Studio, Lodo, Hankey, Uemedimo and Weber, Studio Barnes, Dualjas. There are new forms of partnership and collaboration between two or more practices and institutions. Ursula Beeman, Horizontale, BDR Bureau and Carton 123 Architekten, Office 24/7 and Lemon Pebble. There are practices that work across and through disciplines that are adjacent to architecture. Wengrow and Wiseman, Killing Architects, The Funambulist, Studio Serge Clotet, Sami Balogi, Gloria Cabral, with Cécile Fromont. And finally, there are medium and large-sized practices, often with an emphasis on community, land rights, sustainability, research and social policy in hands-on, innovative ways. Mpeti Morogeli Architects, Flores and Pratt, Kate Otten Architects, Sweetwater Foundation, Neri and Hugh, Office for Political Innovation, Rahul Mehrotra with Ranjit Hoskote, Scape Landscape Studio, ZAO Standard Architecture, and White Architecture. For the first time ever in the Biennale Architettura, the curator's special projects and special participants are a large category themselves. They are designed special because of the shared vision of architecture that they represent. There are 4 topics: food, agriculture, and climate change, the group both and. Food, architecture, and climate change, Margarita Wacko and Gloria Pavita. Geography and gender, Inez Weitzman. Geography and gender, Caroline Wanjiko Kihato, Claire Loveday, and Marelli Storp. Geography and gender, J. Yolanda Daniels. And finally, in this category, Gugu Mtembu. Mnemonic, Ajay Associates with Kiran Nada Museum of Art. Luti, Craig McClenachan Architects. And Studio Howeler with Josh Begley and Yoon and Jean Han. The 5th category, Guests from the Future, provides a glimpse into who the architect of the future is likely to be and where their interests, concerns, and ambitions may lie. The term comes from literature, not architecture. In a book published in 1966, the Hungarian writer György Dallas imagined or examined what publishers have described as the most extraordinary encounter in the history of 20th century literature, a meeting between the 56-year-old Russian poet Anna Akhmatova and the 36-year-old British philosopher Isaiah Berlin in Leningrad in 1945. The two sat down at 9 in the evening and talked for 12 hours straight. Neither gave an account of their conversation, but after he left, she wrote a stanza in her epic poem, Poem Without a Hero, in which she described him as a man not yet appeared, strayed from the future. In no particular order, our 22 guests from the future, whose work is threaded through the Arsenale complex and the Central Pavilion, provide a glimpse into who the architect of the future is likely to be. And I'm not going to read out all the names because there's a lot of them, but we can turn. Thank you. There are 3 special participants whose work complements the curator's footnotes, a commentary thread that runs throughout the exhibition. Filmmaker Amos Gitai, architecture's first poet laureate, Lionheart, and the photographer James Morris are located in the Arsenale at key moments. Their work has an allegorical, sometimes oblique relationship to the other participants, and is experienced in the exhibition during moments of pause, rest, and reflection. One of the great joys of putting together an exhibition of this scale and size has to be the opportunity to see one's ideas reflected through the eyes and understanding of others, particularly in disciplines that are adjacent to one's own. The unfolding of the exhibition's visual identity, which is visual in its broadest sense, not simply or only graphic, was such a key part of the conceptual development of the Laboratory of the Future that now, after 9 months, it is hard to imagine that it was ever designed. It feels as though its visual identity was always in place, which is the highest compliment I can pay to the graphic designer, Fred Swart. Like any language, its DNA is deeply buried, so that the speaker only ever catches glimpses, hints, and echoes. We were fascinated by the lion of Venice and the existing typographic vocabulary of La Biennale as an institution. Merging both place and organization and using the negative space of the title of the exhibition provided us very early on with the base visual structure that played on Africa's uniquely deep evolutionary history in the sense of anthropological time, but also steered us away from the visual cliches surrounding contemporary evocations of Africa. It freed us to think about our own continent as a place that simultaneously belongs to the future and to the deep, deep past. From there, we moved through a number of iterations to land on the identity that you see here today and that we look forward to seeing across the city in a few months' time. Our colour palette was derived from the actual colours of a part of West Africa where I'm from, not the colours of popular Western imagination about Africa. In one of our many workshops held in different places between Africa and Europe, the exercise Accra in Colour provided the base on which the graphic language is built. And finally, there is one striking and unexpected coincidence between Venice and the African diaspora, which is actually taking place in the streets outside today. From the outset, I was interested in exploring the sometimes hidden links between the world that Venice represents and the world from which I come. One of the most significant moments in the diasporic calendar, from South America to the Caribbean to the UK and beyond, is Carnival, historically a place of liberation where slaves could, for a day, a week, reverse the order of slavery and view themselves not as people in bondage, but as free. In the Laboratory of the Future, replacing the traditional meetings that take place at the end of the exhibition, Carnival offers a space for communication in which words, views, perspectives, and opinions are traded, heard, analysed, and hopefully remembered. Politicians, poets, filmmakers, writers, activists, and organisers will share the stage with architects, academics, and students. curating a public event program is increasingly a form of architectural practice that attempts to bridge the gulf between architects and the public. It begins on the 21st of May with the first event and concludes in November, spanning the life of the exhibition and providing a space for dialogue and contemplation. Additionally, supported by Rolex, details of the Carnival program will be revealed and released closer to the exhibition opening. And now, almost to the end, and again for the first time ever, the Biennale Architettura will include the Biennale College Architettura, which will run from the 25th of June to the 22nd of July. On the 17th of February this year, just a few days ago, the open call for 50 fully funded places in a month-long experimental School of Architecture, focusing on the twin themes of the exhibition, decarbonization and decolonization, was closed. I expected at most a couple of hundred applications. We had 986. I think it's safe to say that the appetite for such a program in architecture schools and practices is high. 15 renowned international tutors, Samia Heni, Marina Otero, Nana Biamaofusu, Thiresh Govender, Lorenzo Romito, Jacopo Galli, Philippa Tumubweni, Jilan Fal, Rahesh Ram, Guillermo Fernandez Abascal, Urtzi Grau, Samir Panja, Alice Clancy, Sarah de Villiers and Manija Verghese, and myself will work with 50 international students, early career academics and early career practitioners selected through the open call process. A documentary of the educational experience will be filmed by the Spanish filmmaker Angel Cubero Borrega and released in October this year. And an international cast of critics will join the college in July. The exhibition was designed by a team of curatorial assistants and designers, Emmett Scanlon, Lawrence Lord, Alice Clancy, and Sarah de Villiers. And I am deeply, deeply grateful for their support. I'm also indebted to my team of young researchers at the African Futures Institute, whose work on Guests from the Future unearthed a cache of talent across the Black Atlantic that confirmed our belief. And finally, and not least, I would also like to thank the entire team at La Biennale di Venezia, and especially President Cicutto, for their trust and faith. Grazie mille.
Prima di concludere,
Before closing this press conference, I would now pass the floor to Tristram Hunt, the director of the Victorian and Albert Museum, curator of the Applied Art Pavilion, an historic commitment we have with this important institution.
Cicutto, and thank you, Lesley, for your inspiring cultural leadership of this absolutely superb Biennale. Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be joining you to announce details of the Applied Arts Pavilion special project at the Biennale Architettura 2023, the 7th consecutive year of the collaboration between the Victoria and Albert Museum, from where I speak to you today, and La Biennale di Venezia. This important creative partnership, first initiated by my predecessor, the late Dr. Martin Rott in 2015, remains the only special project between the Biennale and an international museum. We're immensely proud of this innovative relationship, and it's been a joy to see it develop and thrive. For this, the 18th International Architecture Exhibition, we focus on Lesley's theme of decolonization and present tropical modernism, architecture and power in West Africa, in collaboration with the Architectural Association London and Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Kumasi. This presentation, curated by the V&A's Dr. Christopher Turner, with Nana Biama for Ofasu and Bushra Mohammed of the Architectural Association, critically reflects on the imperial history of tropical modernism and the adaptation of a European modernist aesthetic to the hot, humid conditions of what was once British West Africa. The presentation explores the way in which this very distinctive architectural style was initially developed in the late 1940s by husband and wife architectural duo Maxwell Fry and Jane Drew. Their distinctive language of climate control that made only superficial reference to the locality was propagated through the Department of Tropical Architecture they established in 1954 at the Architectural Association, where they taught European architects to work in the then colonies. Yet this post-war program to reform and rebuild was often employed as a tool to support colonial rule and to offset calls for independence. This initiative, though, could not hold back the winds of change that blew across Africa, as 2/3 of the continent won their freedom in the decade that followed Kwame Nkrumah becoming the first Prime Minister and President of Ghana in 1957. In the tropical modernist style, Nkrumah saw the possibility for nation building and for an expression of his Pan-African ideology. Architects from Eastern Europe were commissioned to work alongside Ghanaian architects to create monumental structures intended as beacons for a free Africa. Through an analysis of the works of the Department of Tropical Architecture and the outpost set up a decade later at Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, alongside a dozen key projects, the presentation is centered around a multi-channel film installation featuring interviews with surviving protagonists and footage of remaining buildings. Tropical modernism, architecture and power in West Africa considers the dual contradictory power of architecture, both as a means of colonial suppression and a symbol of nascent political freedom, to explore a transitional moment in which a break with the colonial past was articulated through architecture. Finally, I wanted to emphasize the Victoria and Albert Museum's support for Manisha Kelle, Senior Curator of the V&A's Contemporary Programme, who is one of 4 curators commissioned by the British Council to transform the British Pavilion this year. We look forward greatly to continuing our collaboration with La Biennale di Venezia at the 18th International Architecture Exhibition, and we pay tribute to Lesley's really inspiring programme for this year, and we look forward to working for many years to come. President, thank you.
Thank you, Tristram. See you soon. Voglio ringraziare Lesley perché
I want to thank Lesley because in her presentation today, she has already shown us a lot of the original nature of our proposal. We've seen many faces of women and men, not objects, and many thoughts behind them, but also silences that invited us to reflect on what has been said. Thank you, Lesley, for this. Many greetings to all those who have followed us online, and see you all in Venice.